skills, which is amazing. So for the last session of the day, our speaker is part of Illumio's product and technical marketing team. He has more than 25 years of industry experience, Senior Director, Product and Technical Marketing for 3 steps to stop the spread of ransomware. Welcome, Faraz, Aladin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me okay?
Nope.
No. You have to come closer to the mic.
I have this way.
There we go.
All right, thank you very much. If it's too loud, maybe somebody in the back can help me tune it down a little bit. Faraz, Aladin from Illumio. First things first, thanks for sharing your time with us over here today and talk a little bit about one of the more vexing problems we see out there in the industry. I am going to have to do the swap displays. Now if I can just figure out how to do that. Can anybody tell me if I want to swap displays? There we go. All right. So let me start by saying this. I realize I'm standing between you and the cocktails. So I'm going to try and keep things on track and moving. Otherwise, I'm not going to get any good reception later on when I'm drinking with you. So I'm worried about my drinks, and I'm going to get started and keep you guys on track over here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that's probably, you guys have all seen. The world has changed, and I just don't mean the last 2.5 years of pandemic. If anything, the pandemic has just accelerated that change. If we take a look at our cyber landscape, securing that cyber landscape has become increasingly difficult. And some of the reasons that you see over there are great examples of why people do these things, but at the same time, this opportunity that we've had, whether it's moving to cloud or working with a variety of different cloud providers or having your assets in a variety of places, enabling remote workers, etc. All of these things, they give you a great advantage in terms of your business and productivity, but they also come up with some of those challenges. And one of the challenges that we have seen, not only just in the last 2.5 years, which I said has only accelerated this problem, is one of unauthorized access into the network. You can call it by any name, ransomware, malware, all kinds of attacks that have happened on supply chain. There is a common element in there, and that element being that people are able to get into the network, whether they are inside the network already or outside, and are able to disrupt your business. And the idea is that people are actually facing challenges, big issues. What are the issues, challenges that come up when you start doing these things, right? So we talk to a variety of customers, small and large. And one might think that this is a problem that actually is only applicable to large customers and enterprises. But I'm sorry to disappoint those folks, is that this is something that is pervasive. From small mom and pop shops to the largest of the organizations, we have seen and have talked to customers where either ransomware, malware has created a habit. And it's not just only about that, it's a matter of inconvenience. It's actually becoming a much bigger thing. Hold on to that thought. So what is really happening behind the scenes when you are doing all of those things? Digital transformation, moving to cloud, variety of different SaaS services, all variety of people working across the globe remotely. Well, a couple of things that have highlighted over here. Number one is your attack surface is expanding. What I mean by that is there was a time when people had all of their assets neatly located in their on-prem data center. I don't know when that was, but it seems like a way far dream. In fact, by many measures, Gartner says that by 2025, 93% of the workloads running anywhere in the world will be some form of in public cloud. So what is really happening is that your perimeter has gone to a variety of different places. It's no longer just clean cut in your environment. That's another way of saying that your perimeter is nowhere. You don't have a perimeter anymore. That attack surface is now very large, and once you do get inside, you can actually laterally move around. Hold on to that thought, first thing. Number second is your security approach has become very fragmented. The tools and techniques that you would have used in your on-prem data center environment are very different from, let's say, what you have available in AWS. And that might again be very different from another cloud provider. We all live in a hybrid multi-cloud environment. So now you are dealing with a fragmented security approach where you have a variety of different tools and you can't get a unified security policy because they all work differently, and in many cases you don't have access to the infrastructure like in a public cloud environment, which you do in your own environment, and you have designed certain tools and techniques based on that. And the last thing is that people have realized, and I'm sure all of you over here know, that breaches are becoming more catastrophic. As I mentioned, it's no longer just I can't get to my email or I can't track my beverage tracking application, how many vending machines are out there. It is actually things like Colonial Pipeline, where people really had a hard time. You guys are well aware of that. Or in cases of hospitals where it could be a life and death situation. So this is actually becoming a much bigger problem than just your inconvenience or something that you can't get at some point in time. It is actually a question of how do we deal with this on a daily basis where it impacts our quality of life, it actually impacts our own personal existence in many cases, as in the hospital examples. And ransomware actually has moved from just, as I said, becoming a cybersecurity nuisance to actually a business resilience problem. It is something when your environment is shut down because of a supply chain attack or some ransomware malware taking over your workloads, you actually have a major deal to deal with. It is now your business that has stopped. So, why is that so? The reason is very simple. It's a lucrative business model. Upwards of 80% of the people who do get attacked by ransomware pay up. Now you might think again, this is something that the GEs of the world and the large corporations of the world, they pay up and that's where it happens. No. This actually happens to a variety of small, medium businesses as well. I can give you examples of school districts. I can give you examples of small businesses where they have 100, 200 workloads in the cloud and they actually have been ransomware. So this is a problem. This is not just about large companies. Companies of all sizes and shapes are actually facing this problem for one simple reason. You pay up, and that's what motivates these guys to do it. So what exactly is this problem, right? Let's go back to the first principles. You all do have firewalls or some mechanism that you protect your environment with. So why can't we just deal with that? I know that I have put a firewall, and now I'm stopping bad guys from coming in. Whether you feel you're successful or not, but you feel that I have something that's doing that job for me. Well, the problem is very simple, and that's one of lateral movement, and I'll show you a visual picture of that. But the idea is that people do connect from outside into your network, whether it's allowed or not allowed. You guys all heard that case of Target, right, where the attackers actually came in through the HVAC system. Or another one where it's in the casino, the fish tank, internet-connected fish tank where they got in through it. That's the problem of lateral movement. And in fact, if you think about it, even people that are inside your house, inside your network, who are legitimate users, they may or may not have access to everything that they need. Or you might say that this set of folks don't need access to this application. Whether intentional or not, some of these things do happen from inside the network. So the idea is that you actually need a framework, a philosophy, which basically allows you to control whether it's from outside or inside, but you need explicit permission to be able to access resources, right? Let's take a look at this visual, right? Something like this, probably all of you have seen. This is a classic example of layer 2 connectivity in a data center environment between application components, right? Applications don't live in a fixed single box today, a monolithic box that they used to. There's a variety of different components. You have your web front end, you have your processing, you have your databases, you might have an analytics engine, you might have some other third-party APIs, and all of these components need to talk to each other. This is great. This is how applications work. This is how businesses work. This great open connectivity is also a boon for attackers. Because now guess what? You land on one workload, and now you have the ability to laterally move. Just like the good guys do, these guys can also move laterally because you have those open pathways. And before you know, your environment is actually being hijacked, and many of your workloads, if not all of your workloads, actually do have something that is creating bad stuff. This is the problem. So what is the answer? You want to segment your network, right? This is precisely the reason why submarines are not built as one single hull. They have compartments in there, right? Because when there is a breach and you start taking in water, if it was one single hull, there's a very good chance that submarine is going down. But with the compartments, you can try to isolate the breach in that compartment, and a very good chance that you will stay afloat. This is what you need to be able to do in your environment. Segment your environment. Now, segmentation is not something new. Many of you over here must have worked with it, dealt with it. Network segmentation, I can create my VLANs, I can create my firewall zones. So what is new over here? What is different and new is that we all have understood is that you need to have your perimeter as close to the thing that you are trying to secure. That's the first principle of security. The further you move away from the subject, you lose visibility and you lose context. So ideally, every workload should be a perimeter, should be a boundary. The decision whether this packet can go somewhere or not should not be made 2-3 hops out after the packet has left the network workload. And somewhere in the network or a switch or a router or a firewall or something is going to take some action. No, the idea is that your trust boundary, every workload is your trust boundary. Your trust boundary is not out on your perimeter in your north-south or somewhere in a zone or in a VLAN. It is your workload. So every workload, if I can get this straight, that will help. But every workload is your trust boundary. How do you do that? Because you might be thinking now, I have this whole environment, I have cut it down into 10, 12 zones, I have my firewalls connecting these zones. What's the problem with that? The problem is that once you land on a workload, you can move laterally, and if you are not touching the firewall, if the firewall does not see that traffic, it cannot do anything. It is like telling our kids that once you go outside of the house, somebody will tell you what to do or what not to do, what's right or wrong. We don't do that, right? We tell them at our house what is allowed, what is not allowed, what you should be doing, what you should not be doing. That is the idea. Your trust boundary is your workload. And when you think about it, if you have every workload as a trust boundary, how do you do all of this and manage it together? So I'm not going to give you an Illumio spiel on that, how Illumio does it. I'll let you extrapolate, but I'll tell you what the solutions are for doing this kind of a thing and why it matters, specifically in the case of ransomware. What we talk about today, while it might seem specific to ransomware, it actually is true. The techniques that are used are true for a variety of other things, whether it be malware or stopping unauthorized access within your environment, or whether it's for compliance reasons and things like that. So, this is what brings us to zero trust and zero trust microsegmentation. So zero trust is not a product. It's a framework, it's a way of thinking. And all it says is that you do not assume anything in terms of this connection should be allowed. Everything is denied unless you are explicitly allowed to do something. So if I say in my network, person A can talk and person B can talk, that means those are the only two people can talk, everything else in that network is denied. That's the principle of zero trust. Zero trust microsegmentation is a key tenet to stopping that unauthorized lateral movement. So what does it mean? Number one, first things first, this means that your compute, every workload has its segment, like we talked. I'll show you a visual around that. Second, your workload on which you're putting your trust boundary should be independent of the underlying networking construct, whether it be a VLAN, IP subnet, VXLAN, whatever are those techniques. This has got nothing to do with the underlying network. Workloads should be able to live migrate between your data center and your public cloud, or to multiple clouds. Your policy should travel with it because it has no dependency on the underlying network fabric. Number three, you should be able to live migrate without resegmenting, and it should be able to scale. Because you may have, if you think about it, every workload is a segment. So if you have 2,000 workloads, you have 2,000 segments. You have to be able to scale and be able to manage them centrally. Nobody's going to go and individually look at every segment. You need a central way of managing this thing and creating policies that are very natural language-like. I'll show you an example of that. So the goal over here is what? The goal is that the first workload that gets hijacked is the last workload that gets hijacked. Because remember, your trust boundary is the workload. If you control whatever's on it over there, there's no possibility of it getting anywhere else. That's the goal, right? Easier said than done, but that's the goal. So, here's a visual. When we start thinking about it in terms of zero trust segmentation, everything over here is one boundary, one trust boundary for every workload. And what you decide based on policies will determine who can talk to who, right? So what this means is, if I can advance these slides. I think this is stuck, but my apologies. Okay, so what this means is that if you have 20 workloads, you have 20 segments. You have 200 workloads, those many segments. And this now tells you about the scale. Again, you might be thinking that this is something that is applicable where people have hundreds of thousands of workloads or tens of thousands of workloads. No, this is actually true even if you have hundreds of workloads. And you can easily be attacked by ransomware, and having a good segmentation technique in place can help you solve that problem. So, how does it work, right? The idea is you still need your perimeter firewalls. So if I take the analogy of my house, I do want to put in a front door lock, right? That's my north-south boundary. That makes sure that I can control who comes inside the house, who can go out from the house. That's your north-south perimeter. But then, I don't want anybody who's allowed to come inside the house to be able to go to every room inside my house. Maybe I just want them to be in the family room and probably use the kitchen. I don't want them roaming around in every place in my house. That's your east-west lateral movement. You do need to have that. And of course, there are many other things you would do in terms of overall protection. You might do some deep packet inspection, you might do some intrusion detection, and all of the techniques using AI, ML, and all of the analysis forensic you can do. That is not something that I would say not needed, but you do need these basics in place. That's kind of like asking my neighbors to watch my house, right? I have my front door lock, I have put locks on individual rooms, and then I also tell my neighbors, hey, keep an eye out if you see somebody kind of fishing around over here or there, let me know. That's your artificial intelligence or additional things that you might do. So the concept is actually you do need the firewalls or whatever mechanism you use for your north-south boundary, but then you do need your east-west protection. So, what are some of the things that people do to stop ransomware? Here's a good example of 3 workloads talking to each other. And many of these workloads, when they come up, guess what? By default, you have certain ports open. RDP and SMB are great examples of that. Now, you might be thinking that malware, people need sophistication to create a specific malware and do something to get into the network. Actually, it turns out, whether it's a complex, sophisticated malware that is looking for specific data in your database or client list, or it's just a simple malware, I'll go in there and see what I can get my hands on and walk out with that. They both use the same underlying techniques, which is lateral movement. Now here's how this thing probably works out. You land on a machine, you have the open RDP connection to another server. Which, by the way, when was the last time a server had to RDP to another server? Probably never. Why do you want to have this port open? Because this is a pathway for your ransomware to propagate. And before you know, you have this situation. So, what is the minimal amount of things you absolutely should do? Now, you might do a lot of forensic, as I said, for sophisticated malware. But what is that minimum amount of information you need, and what should you be doing to stop this, right? You close the doors. You cut out SMB or RDP if it's not needed. RDP was a great example. I use RDP, it's actually my definition of RDP's ransomware distribution protocol. And, well, I'm sorry, Microsoft, but the Microsoft gods in Seattle are not happy with me. But the idea is that these are just open ports. If you have 5,000 servers, 1,000 servers, 50 servers, these are open ports that you can travel on. Now, you might say, Faraz, you have cut out all RDP. I do still need some access by my admin group. Sure, you absolutely can. You cut out RDP everything and then selectively say only this particular person or this particular group, the admin group, can access RDP and only through this particular port or maybe through a jump server, whatever might be the case, right? So the idea is that you actually want to be able to close the doors right up front and stop that before you go into all of this AI, ML, deep packet inspection, layer 7 intelligence, IDS, and doing all sorts of forensic. You probably do need to do it. But the basis of doing all of this should be on the fact that you have closed the open doors and windows. This is like, my house. I have a window up in the attic. It's always open. Nobody comes through it, nobody goes through it, it's always open. Guess what? In bad times, when let's say there's riots and things like that, do I want to leave that attic window open? Probably not. I want to close it off. So that's the idea. You close the doors that are not needed, and there are many, 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 many such doors and ports in your networks. And that's what we need to do to stop lateral propagation. Illumio can certainly help you with that, but I'll leave that discussion for another day. So let's continue on our journey, right? We touched on network segmentation. You guys are all not new to segmentation. You have heard the term, you possibly used it and deployed it in your environment. There are certain things that network segmentation does and it's absolutely right for. Traffic engineering, DOS attacks, ARP spoofing. Those are all things that are network-based and people do that in the network. When it comes to workload segmentation, the priorities are a little different. It's all about making sure that lateral movement is only as per you desire. You do not want to leave certain things open. So that way, if a malware comes in, can propagate, and now also has an external connection to go out. What's the first thing that bad malware or ransomware does? They land on your workload, they open up a connection to the outside world, right? That command and control channel. Then they can download a payload, which they can put into the network, which executes certain things, bad or whatever they're trying to collect. And then they need to exfiltrate that. Close the doors. That's what will help you. Now, if you start to do analysis, who was the hacker, what was their motive, what did they take out? Yes, all of those things can happen later. First step is close the doors. So, we want to segment along human and non-human boundaries. We talked about non-human boundaries in terms of closing of ports, etc. But this is where the interesting part of humans come in, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, humans have to work with these machines. So in the previous example of RDP, you can say, I have 10,000 servers. With one click, I write a policy. I do not want any RDP in my environment. And then you can say selectively, this individual XYZ or this group XYZ, which constitutes of these 4 individuals in the admin group, can access this particular server or this set of servers. That's how you protect yourself. Make the trust boundary your workload. Cut out the ports that you're not using, which are commonly used by malware. I gave you just 2 examples of RDP and SMB. There are quite a few others. In fact, between the 4 protocols, WinRM, SMB, RDP, and I forget one right now, they constitute about 70% of the malware. They use these open ports. They're open by default in your environment, in many cases. So the model that I talked about is, there's a couple of ways people start their journey. The first one might be is that it's, let's say, a greenfield environment, or I have very good knowledge of how my applications are behaving. In which case, then I can say, hey, I only want to allow these things, which means explicitly everything else is denied. That is the principle of zero trust. Or sometimes you might say, hey, I do not have a good view into my network, what applications are talking to each other, because I haven't really known, and I might end up breaking something. In that case, you start with your step 1 of taking out things that you already know you don't want in your environment. Whether it is RDP, whether it might be anything else, you might have a CIO mandate that might say, no unencrypted protocols in our environment. Or they might have an edict saying, no communication between dev and prod, unless there's a specific reason. We don't want to disturb our production environment. So you could very clearly just say, no communication between dev and prod. And then selectively you can say, hey, I do have this set of developers that sometimes from time to time, they need to access the production database so they can do some work. So now you have cut out things that you don't want and then start slowly opening up. Whichever route you take, the idea being that you're arriving at a model where you're not allowing unauthorized communications in your environment. That's the principle of zero trust. This is an example of a policy that should be, and what Illumio gives you, which is a top piece. It should be literally plain language that you can read. Clearly say, my production web servers in a particular location should not be allowed to, or should be allowed, whatever might be the case, but something that is as plain English as possible. versus something that's down there. That's what machines understand. Humans, a bit difficult. And that's the model you want to make sure. Natural language policy, and let the orchestration mechanism, whether it's Illumio or whatever, do the heavy lifting of translating that natural language into actual ACLs or rules that the workload can understand. You want a declarative model. You want a model that basically you can say, do this, not how. We tell Alexa, play music. We don't tell them, go to the internet, go to this line or that. We just say, play rock music, play this band. It figures out how to do it, where to get it from. That's exactly what you need. You want to be able to block things by saying it literally, at least in the Illumio world, block RDP and SMB on all workloads. As simple as that. We figure it out. What are the specific ACLs, layer 3, layer 4 things that we need to populate on each workload to make this thing happen? Illumio was born and designed to play and do this role extremely well. I won't bore you with all the details of Illumio as a company, but this is the zero trust platform that Illumio provides. It's a platform that actually works across your environment, across your compute estate. Whether you are in an on-prem environment, whether you have public cloud assets, whether you have containers, and a variety of things in between. It also works for all of your assets, whether it be servers, endpoints, or your cloud objects. And there are two specific things we provide. Number one is that attack surface visibility. You can actually see how your applications are communicating with each other, and should they be. If you see your point of sale application having a connection into your HRM, that doesn't sound right. Should be investigated. But how do you know that? You're not looking at, you can't be looking at network traffic, TCP flows and ping flows. You want actual, from the workload, what is the application traffic? That's what is meant by attack surface visibility. And second is the segmentation policy, which is unified across the environments and across the assets. And of course, this has to address the use cases that you see at the top, whether it's from solving the ransomware problem, to gaining visibility, to doing cloud migration, to doing IT/OT separation, and in fact, some of the customers that we have even use Illumio data for incident response to actually see after the fact what happened, because now you have the data to see this connection was made at this time. So again, this is just a framework on how Illumio operates. There are specific capabilities that we won't go into today. We have my colleagues here in the room, and please come and talk to us after if this is of interest to you. But what I do want to leave you with is a few things that what Illumio can provide you. This is just an example of one of the application dependency maps. You can clearly see your applications and how they're talking to each other. In fact, in this particular example, in the top left, you see you have a web server that is communicating with a variety of other things. And it's also talking directly to a database in the bottom right. Doesn't sound right. Why should your web server be directly talking to a database? Maybe investigating, right? So the idea is you want to be able to get visibility of assets, whether it's from workload to workload, application to device, between an endpoint or a server, or it might be some other external entities that you're talking to. Illumio can provide you many of these capabilities, and actually something that our customers really appreciate. So where is the customer journey in all of this? Talking to a variety of different customers, small and large and everything in between, we have seen customers actually start with visibility, and the goal over here is they want to go from a transactional to a transformational model, right? They want to be able to make sure that they are gearing themselves up to solve today's problems, but then also set them up for tomorrow's challenges. So a variety of customers we talk to, many of them start with attack surface visibility. They actually want to get the visibility, the kind of mapping that I showed you, and then they travel up. That doesn't mean customers don't start with, let's say, application ring fencing. If you are a financial institution, you have Swift applications. By regulation, you are supposed to do certain things to be compliant. You might start there. You might say, hey, you know what? I just want to ring fence my Swift environment and make sure that's properly locked down, and then I can look at other things that I need to do. Those are my high value assets. It might not be Swift, it might be something else for somebody else, but that's the idea. The goal is to get towards zero trust segmentation. And if you're looking at this graph, you can quickly see that as the attack spreads, the consequences get worse, right? It's bigger impact. You ideally want to be able to stop this thing right before it starts to propagate into your environment. And that's exactly what Illumio does. We have done it for a variety of customers, small and large, as I mentioned. There's a school district that actually got ransomware, and we were able to help them out, isolate the machines, and protect the other ones. The school stayed in session. Here's another example of a brewery in Australia. Their supply chain got compromised, and they were able to use Illumio to actually, again, quarantine the workloads that were affected, do an analysis, close off all the ports, and beer started flowing. Not having beer in Australia is a social crime. This company got really bad reputation for not shipping beer for 2-3 weeks straight. I don't know what it did to their stock price, but they certainly took a PR hit. This is also an example of a law firm. This was an existing customer. It still is an existing customer of Illumio. And they actually found out that they had some malware ransomware. And when they did a forensic analysis, they called an outside company. Only 12 of their machines, which were not protected by Illumio, were compromised. The rest of the machines did not. In fact, so much so that they did not even have to do a regulatory filing, that it was not of a size or impact big enough that they had to do a filing. By law, they were required to. So again, these are just examples. And again, these are not just large breweries or large law firms. These are everything in between, from small school districts to small mom and pop shops. So what can Illumio do for you? A variety of things. Help you with some of your malware, ransomware problems. Gives you a declarative model. So you can actually declare, I do not want these things in my network, and I want these things to be able to happen. How it does it, what are the specific things that need to be done in terms of layer 3, layer 4, and all of these things, let Illumio figure it out. Quickly block your command and control channel, because this is the key in ransomware, right? Ransomware getting onto a workload is the first step. The second step is establishing the command and control channel. If I can write a policy and say that, you know, on all of my servers, I'm going to take these 3-4 processes, command.exe or utilsartic.exe, and just cut it out. Those servers don't need to do that. You have stopped that command and control channel. We give you a mode to test things out before you actually implement. The last thing you want is you do this thing, and what happens in the firewall world? You write a rule and you wait. Whether it worked or not depends on whether you get a phone call. Why did you do this? You don't want that. So you can actually simulate what is going to happen and then put them into enforcement. The goal being you can sleep well and not become a headline on Wall Street Journal the next day when you wake up with your company having been hijacked. Now, I'm going to pause here. There's a little bit of how Illumio stuff works. We won't get into it right now. I really want to do this over cocktails. If anybody is interested, it makes it much more fun for me, no, for all of us. But it's a very simple way how Illumio works, and we can kind of talk about it, tell you how we can solve your problems, and I'll leave you with this thought. Illumio is not new to this. Illumio has been in this business for 7+ years shipping a product. 9 years of our life we have spent doing this thing. And it's a very simple mission that we have. We want to prevent breaches from becoming cyber disasters. As simple as that. And we have done this. If you don't know Illumio, if you haven't heard about Illumio, you certainly have heard about our customers. They voted with their wallets to stop this problem. So I'm going to leave you with this thought and a few questions that we can talk about, chat about over cocktails. And thank you very much for your time. You guys have been a great audience, and I know I've been the last person on this stage, but this is really appreciated.
So you really wanted to do the Q&A over cocktails, right?
I can do it now or continue it into cocktails. But yes, here I am. Anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them or throw some light. I know,
it could also be over cocktail.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day for everyone. Yeah, but thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, and thanks again for sharing your time with us.
So now it's a trade show, which is going to happen in the ballroom. So it's going to be till 7:30. You can enjoy some cocktails. Finally, I know you've been waiting for that. So the Bridgetini, you can enjoy it while discovering the latest technologies from our partners. And the cocktail is sponsored by Innovators, which is Dell and HP. So enjoy it. And the gala night will start at 7:30 in the ballroom. So be present, have fun, and I'm gonna see you tomorrow morning, and I hope you're gonna have energy, right?
Yes.
Hangover and energy, that's, or not.
Or hangover with energy drink.
Exactly, or coffee. So have a beautiful night, everyone, and thank you for today.